So at this point in time, it's probably what you've been waiting for, is to hear from the folks who've been sharing all of this great information. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Benz, who will be facilitating our panel. We're going to spotlight our panel's video, so make sure if you are on the panel that you've got your video on. For those of you who don't know Sarah, and I can't imagine you don't know her, she is an NCII TA provider who works in 3 of our states: Texas, South Carolina, and Colorado.
As Tessie mentioned, in this part of the celebration, we're going to be asking our panelists questions from you. So if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll kick those over. But in the meantime, we had some pre-submitted questions that I want to ask you. So the first one is actually for the New York folks. Just incredible work that has been done out there in New York. So what are y'all planning next for DBI implementation? What's next? You've done so much. What's next?
What's next? So what we presented on spoke to a model that we found successful because it's sustainable. So working with superintendent teams, with coaches at the schools, and just continuing that same model that we saw successful, and it's still taking off. We're just checking in just once a year with the folks in Manhattan, just because they've got it up and running. So we're hoping to kind of generalize that across different contexts and different boroughs.
I love that. Yeah, capitalize on that success. That's a good strategy. I'm going to write that down. Leslie, the next question is for you. So this is a little insider knowledge, but how have you been able to bring DBI as you've transitioned into a new role? What does that look like in your new role?
Wow. So yeah, we did all the development and testing and piloting of the NCII tools very early on in the beginning of the work 10 years ago. So I really have been here since the ground floor. I was in that district for about 7 or 8 years, doing that work and implementing. And just a year and a half ago, I have moved to a new district. It's a little bit more of an urban ring district, twice the size of where I had been. And so we will be starting from scratch. However, in starting from scratch, I know that I don't have to test everything out again. When we actually implemented in more of our schools in my previous district, it went quick. It was easy as pie because, we had already done it once. The tools had been tested and vetted. And then, now moving into this district, all I had to do is say, this is what we're going to do, support it. It's really important to know that you're supported by your leaders, and knowing that I have the support of my superintendent, and, I can easily implement and work with the principals so that they can indeed day-to-day do that work. So I don't anticipate it to be difficult because I already have that framework in my mind. And so, I'm really excited. COVID did put a little bit of a wrench into that plan. So we'll begin in September. In fact, I had a tough meeting this week, and that's what I did. I presented all of our DBI tools and materials, and this is what we're going to do. So we're off to a good start.
Oh, that's awesome, Leslie. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard about your name and intensive intervention together for like the first 6 months of my job. So that's great to know that and I like how you said COVID kind of put a damper, not it completely smashed my implementation. So a true champion, that's for sure. And then Leslie, we also had some people asking about the maps that you discussed in the video. And maybe in the meantime, you could pop a link to those maps if they're shareable. Other people I think would really be interested in taking a look at those, if that's okay.
Sure, I'll try to do that.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. We have a question. Georgia, Miss Rondalyn. People are so impressed with that online tool. There was a lot of love in the chat while you were on the video. So people want to know a little bit more about our people, kind of like that one-stop shop idea is just crazy. So are people kind of developing their own tools? And then what tips and resources are there for districts or states that are kind of wanting to try the same thing? Uh-oh, I think you might be muted.
I was.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Your question. So yeah, the Go MTSS SST is program agnostic. So it does allow districts to go in and enter in their own progress monitoring data. So we see a variety of progress monitoring tools that are entered in the application. They can go in and enter in their own vetted interventions for their district. So when they assign a student to an intervention, they're looking from a list that they put in through the initial setup. And so it's not just one program that's utilized with Go MTSS SST, but a district can go in and set up their live site based on their context. And so it's designed in that way where it can meet the needs at their district level. But then what's the good thing about it is if a student leaves one district in Georgia and goes to another district, that district can actually see that student's record inside of the application if they're a Go user, and if they're not a Go user, they will at least see the most recent report for the student and on the student's SLDS page. So it's flexible and fluid enough where it meets the needs of the district. So we like to start our presentations by saying that it's a tool that districts can use. And so it helps them to facilitate their existing process, but at the same time, districts who are looking for structure, it helps to facilitate that process as well. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if every state had something like that, I think 90% of my job may be over. So no, I'm just kidding. That's awesome. That's awesome. There's a follow-up question. Is there a cost associated with it for the districts?
There's no cost to the districts. It is absolutely no cost to the district. So we provide that resource to the districts, and it's voluntary, so they can apply to use it. And we work with them to get started. So right now we have about 28 districts that are using, and we have 25 that are coming on for the upcoming school year. And we foresee with the addition of Tier 2 to our application, and even the integration of Go MTSS SST with the Georgia Online IEP system that's been around for years, we see that we'll see an increase or a spike in those who actually want to use the application. That's what we project.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of love for this in the chat. So go Georgia. I have a few more questions for Georgia, but I'm going to move on for just a second.
Sure.
So Kim St. Martin, Megan Walsh, how are you guys doing? Good. So glad you're here. We had some questions come in about this toolbox is awesome that you guys have built, obviously. How have you guys seen people, like folks using this amazing toolbox? Can you give us a little flavor of it?
Well, really right now it's been kind of relegated to people within our center using it, just because this year was so challenging with COVID. A lot of districts, I think, were hesitant to jump into new things. And so they were hesitant to start DBI implementation for the first time. And so what we've been able to do is use it to kind of look at our own interventions that we suggest and what we're working with people to do and the kinds of data that we're looking to get from districts. And so we've been doing a lot of internal review using some of these tools to kind of prepare them for districts to use. And then we just had a district decide, yes, 100% they wanted to implement in the fall. So that's kind of exciting to have some districts who are starting to come online now.
Yes.
We're using across the state, we're engaging in a DBI model demonstration. And so we really are focusing on a district with 3 elementary schools as our first model demonstration to really look at how we can make this process of intensifying literacy instruction realistic, practical, and doable. And so in addition to the professional learning in DBI, we're also really providing in-depth professional learning on reading science and making sure that people understand how to develop skillful readers. And we are adding that layer of professional learning to the professional learning that Megan and some others are going to be providing the multidisciplinary team in the use of database individualization.
Man, that's incredible. And you got to love when you get those districts to say yes. Am I right? That's great. That's awesome. Okay. We had a question. Tom Jones, how are you today? How's Wyoming today?
It's warmer than usual, about 86
look at
degrees, so I
that.
can't complain too much.
That's great. So we had a question come in. Preschool DBI. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So this was one of the things when we had rolled out DBI originally, we focused on, I think, well, initially our focus was just third grade reading proficiency. And our the Wyoming advisory panel for students with disabilities had kind of pushed the issue initially, or asked a question about using the process within the preschool settings. And as I'd mentioned in my video before, this was something that I don't want to say we're hesitant, but it was kind of our lagging piece that we started with, because we were really trying to get our districts up and running with the process. And once we had established our demonstration site with our district, we expanded to match those districts with the child development centers that serve those districts. The process, as far as the framework, was relatively simple. It was the content that was different, the programmatic delivery of that, as well as the assessment or the evaluation of the process. We had I'm trying to think of significantly smaller numbers with our CDCs, but they're also a lot smaller in staff numbers. But everything that we worked through with those CDCs, we saw very positive results. Around 94% of the students that were participating showed increase, and they provided pre-academic as well as social, emotional, and of course behavior at that age group was more of the content pieces they were focused on. The biggest success was looking at the transition piece between our 3 to 5 year old age group, as well as moving, once you bring in those IEP teams, and it really created a seamless process, because our district personnel already knew what our CDCs or our preschool personnel had been working on. They knew the process, and it really just kind of moved these kids from one setting to the next without necessarily any major changes to what they were already receiving.
That's unbelievable. Such cool work happening out there. That's awesome. Okay, let's see. Kim, how are you today?
Great,
Kim
how are
Price.
you?
Good. So Kim, we're going from preschool to high school. So let's chat a little bit about high school implementation. So how, you said it was different, and I think we all picked up on that. So how is that high school implementation or coaching or all of it different? I think we all have our ideas of how it may be different, but I'm interested to hear what you would say.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So at the high school level, we had committed participation from a general education teacher who was really supported and working in collaboration with the special education teacher and administrator. And this teacher was so fully invested in supporting the chosen student with attendance during COVID, with motivation, academic issues, and really took on the primary role of keeping track of the data within the general education classroom while working in tandem with the special education teacher. And so additional supports that Dr. Sacco at the secondary school level included was support from the text called Essentials of Intensive Intervention. And this book has within each chapter a special section called Considerations at the middle and high school levels. So if people are interested in this level, I would say definitely use this book as a resource. Also, there was a lot of focus on case studies, evidence-based classroom strategies for students, very specific to the needs of the teachers and students at the high school level. And then finally, at both elementary and high school levels, what seemed to be the most beneficial were the teaming components in terms of adding to and enhancing the conversations around tiers 2 and 3 that happened at the district level. And these were best implemented within their their school-wide MTSS approach being planned or already in place. So our colleagues at the secondary school level were on DBI school teams with colleagues who also worked with middle school students. So thinking about this transition that happens in place. And these conversations just help to expand what our participants had learned through the DBI concepts with Dr. Donna Sacco, and just these concepts, again, between charters and school districts. And again, at the elementary school level, the most compelling feedback from our school teams was about being able to bring the information from DBI from the professional learning experience to their school teams around tier 2 and tier 3. So it really helped them to become experts in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. Okay, so many questions in the chat. This is getting exciting. It's heating up now, guys. Okay, so Leslie, question for you. How did you get teachers? You mentioned in the chat the severe and profound teachers. How did you get them into this conversation, into intensive intervention?
Well, actually, they saw what was happening with their colleagues and broke their way in. It was actually pretty an exciting happening. They were so impressed with the progress they were seeing and the professional learning opportunities that their colleagues had. They were like, we want in. And, you know, I am a lot about logic and a lot about common sense. And this makes common sense. And it allowed us to identify certain skills and focus on those certain skills that, you know, were being worked on with our severe and profound population, and really begin to talk about the progress that they were making, and really begin to talk about what it meant for them to make that progress every day, how we measured it and how we showed it. So the conversations at our IEP meetings really was flipped on its head, because it is really easy to talk about what students cannot do. This gave us a foundation to talk about what they could do and what they could do better and what we needed to do more of. I don't think that was the original intention, but boy, oh boy, was it an incredibly positive side effect or development. And, you know, we were showing, you know, our students went from, okay, maybe so-and-so is, you know, he's not able to read at grade level to look, he's reading these words. And then we, you know, we had a real foundation and a good solid baseline as to where to go next. Like I said, I don't think that was the original intention, but boy, oh boy, the byproduct was absolutely amazing. And when you see parents see their students making meaningful progress and, you know, tears in their eyes, you know you're headed in the right direction.
I love that answer so much. I feel like that should be on the intro video for sure. Maybe in our 20th year. Congratulations.
Oh, I'll be retired.
Awesome. Okay, Rondalyn, we're back to you. So many questions about the Georgia. So we had one, was this the funding source? So it's free to districts. We have a lot of state folks on the call. What was the funding source for that? Oh, you're muted again. Got her.
So the Georgia Online MTSS SST application is a huge professional development tool for us. And so we use ASPADIG funds to actually make this tool available for our district. So when we were designing this with the IT department, we shared our content from our units of study, which focused on the essential components of an MTSS framework. And so they took what we've been working on with Dr. Tessie Rose Bailey and the regional coaches and other divisions within the department, and they were able to take that information and help us to design the application where it supports professional development. So we use ASPADIG funds, which we focus on professional development, supporting districts across the state. We do specific districts, we have cohort districts, but we also provide that support statewide around the MTSS framework. So we use the ASPADIG grant funds, and then we have support from our special education department as well.
Love that so much. So I hope everyone in the state agencies heard that they use their SPDIG funds for this really awesome application. So we had another one for Jason and Megan, New York again. So Tessie asked, how did communication work about DBI across such a large district?
Good question. So we started small. We started with some model demonstration sites about five years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago. And then through those model demonstration sites, we started to tap into what are called support centers that we have in each of the 5 boroughs. So we tapped into those support centers to start building a little bit of their capacity and start to build out demonstration sites within each borough, and then kind of sister sites as a result of that. So starting very small with intensive intervention and providing all the technical assistance as well behind that. But as an outgrowth of that, Megan started, and I'll let Megan speak to it, she started kind of communicating it and training on intensive intervention through a large portfolio of teachers that she supports. So I'll let Megan speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So we have a portfolio in the special education office of about 500 what are called centrally funded IEP teachers. And this portfolio of teachers receives professional learning through the special ed office, through the New York State Department of Education. So these are very skillfully trained educators. They are trained within literacy interventions and within literacy assessments. And what we were able to do is, since this portfolio of teachers have been receiving training for upwards of about 5 years now, as we moved into about their 4th into 5th year of training, we started to realize that these were a solid group of teachers that were ready to start engaging within this more intensive intervention work, because they had that solid foundational piece within those, foundational elements of reading, right, and assessment. So we started to, within their professional learning, take them through the DBI process, so they started to get that initial understanding. And then we had them work with one case study student over the course of the year to implement these practices and to implement the process. And we also, since these teachers come from schools all across the 5 boroughs, we were able to have meetings within these professional learning sites. So we brought groups of teachers together where they're presenting their case study students and presenting their data. So the outgrowth of that was really spreading DBI even further from the model demonstration sites that we had.
That's awesome. It sounds a little bit like teachers were like, "Ooh, what are you doing? I want to do this too." That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And so happy you didn't say Pinterest. So that would have been, I think, disappointing and interesting at the same time. Awesome. So in this next one, we have one more come in individually, and then I'm going to kind of open it up. We have some broader questions for the panel. So Tom, what are this one comes back to you for Wyoming. What are some next steps with DBI implementation? Is there kind of this, is there still that intent to continue working with your pre-K sites? And I guess just in general, what's next for DBI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've added another pre-K site this past year, but as Leslie mentioned earlier, COVID kind of put a damper on things. So we're in the process of kind of retooling our process and moving forward within the next couple of years. We do have a set of LMS modules for our learning management system that we developed over the initial shutdown of COVID. And so we plan on rolling those out as well as to support both our districts as well as our CDCs as a little bit of asynchronous learning. The other thing too that we've done is, I think COVID, the positive thing is it gave us an opportunity to really try out the virtual aspect of trainings and implementation. So we fielded a community of practice this past January through April. We had 78 practitioners that also involved a number of our special education directors from the districts, our school psychs, and so forth. And we really kind of got a proof of concept in how we provide that training, as well as leveraging a lot of the internal district coaches that we had supported initially and use them in a more of a state capacity to support our teachers throughout the state. And I think we only have 48 districts. We ended up being in about 13 of those districts through the community of practice. and we doubled the total number of practitioners within the state, which we've now, moving forward to next year, we're going to leverage those practitioners to function as coaches and continue to expand through interested districts. And right now, I guess the name of the game for us is capacity, because we have so many districts reaching out to us to help implement this within their schools that we're having to look at bringing more people on board to be able to facilitate that.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you sleep? That just came in. No, I'm just kidding. That didn't. That was a personal question. When do you sleep? Do you sleep? No. No. Okay, good. That makes me feel better. Kim, you raised your hand. I love that.
So I had a private direct message in here that I think is worth talking about as a group. Someone had asked the question about general educators receiving professional learning in reading science, or some refer to it as structured language and literacy. And some folks are seeing that the belief is that structured language and literacy does not mesh with intensive intervention, and asked if that's something that we're experiencing. And no, that's not something that we're experiencing. We see providing a very systematic professional learning scope and sequence in reading science is important. I am a huge advocate, as are my colleague Megan and our staff, in using interventions that are evidence-based, that are already, preferably written, published, so that we're not asking educators to design intervention instruction. And so I'm not seeing the same pushback around structured language and literacy and this notion of intensive intervention. From a state level, database individualization is conceptually defined in our dyslexia bill package, as is the definition of structured language and literacy, the features of evidence-based intervention instruction, the adaptations to intensive intervention, or the taxonomy. The dimensions of intervention intensity are also listed. So we're very much, as a state, working to bring these things together. I will say that bringing things together is in part because of myself, coupled with our colleagues at Michigan Department of Ed and the Literacy Office, are very much aligned with reading science and are working in spaces at the legislative level and across the state to bridge that divide and to, address some of those misconceptions.
Awesome. Thanks for clearing that up, Kim. Sounds like you weren't able to capture all of that in a DM chat. So thank you for clearing that up. All right. So we only have a couple more minutes. This went so fast. So this is actually for everyone. So in efforts to alleviate the awkwardness of like, oh, I'll go, oh, somebody else is talking, just raise your hand if you have a good answer for this. But I think as we're thinking about the audience here and kind of signing off, what's kind of one big recommendation that you have for folks that are engaging in DBI, or getting ready to engage in DBI? Kind of what's your one big recommendation? Yeah, Kim, so glad you volunteered. Thank you.
Thanks. I would say just keep in mind that the school teams are learning a process and trying to determine which pieces might be completely new for them, which pieces might enhance what they're already doing, and those things that they could be doing better. And then also, don't be shy about reaching out to other states doing this work. Be part of the community. Thank you so much to Tom Jones, Dr. Donna Sacco, our colleagues in Rhode Island, Tessie Bailey, Dr. Tessie Bailey, because it really helps especially when you're thinking about how you want to design and go forward.
Love that. That was quick and succinct. That was great. Leslie, yeah, one big recommendation.
I would say start small, think big. Systematic implementation brings about systemic change. And that is what we want in the end. So systematic implementation brings about systemic change.
I'm inspired, Leslie. I'm inspired.
That's been my motto the whole time. 10 years I've been saying that to myself.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to put that on a sticky note on my desk. I love it. I love it. Others. Yeah, Rondalyn.
I'm muted this time.
Go you.
I would just say to stick with it. With implementation, sometimes it starts slow and sometimes you may not see the results. But one of the things that we learned from our national consultant, Dr. Tessie Rose Bailey, is that it is the least implemented component. Professional progress monitoring, which is a part of the DBI process, is the least implemented component, but we know from research that it has a huge effect on student outcomes. So don't give up and don't try to do the work on your own. Definitely look at your teaming structures and build knowledge and capacity together. That collective efficacy is so important.
And NCII has a ton of resources. So a little plug for all of those NCII resources, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. We've probably invented it. So Jason.
What we noticed from the work was working with districts and schools closely in DBI is that once teachers see the progress, right, with their students, it just takes off.
That's all it has to, yeah.
And I think what Kim mentioned too, it's a process. So like what we noticed is each team kind of moves at their own rate in developing fluency with it. But we noticed that within year one, that schools definitely start to develop fluency with the process, and then things take off. And the other piece is to set them up for success. So providing technical assistance and resources as needed, like on training and intervention programs, how to formally progress monitor, how doing PL and looking at diagnostic assessment, the adaptations, all those pieces as things are moving along, but being able to support them as they're ready for it.
I love that. Open the door for them, right? That's awesome. Tom, Kim, Tom, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. And this is one of the things that we've seen is that our data really sells the process. We started small, and the numbers that came out in the student progress, we've expanded within our target district to general education teachers because they're curious to how our special education teachers were making this progress. And matter of fact, this afternoon, I'm going to present to the school board for Laramie County 1. They want to hear more about what our wonderful coaches and our teachers are doing. So I will talk to anybody who will listen, celebrate, and continue to celebrate.
That is true. Words have never been spoken. You will talk to anybody about the DBI process. I really appreciate that. Kim, Megan, any 30 seconds, any parting recommendation thoughts?
Go ahead, Megan.
I think I have a note for myself that I keep on my computer that just says, keep it simple, stupid. But I would say for other people, it would be keep it simple, smarties. You're all so smart and there's so many knowledgeable people out there. Sometimes we forget that we need to find the simple in this really complicated process for our teachers to make this more doable for them.
Awesome, y'all. This was so much fun. I think this is the best panel I've ever been a part of, honestly. So I'm going to now turn it back over to Tessie Rose Bailey for the last part, the most exciting part of today's event. So Tessie, let me turn it back over to you. Thank y'all so much.
Yes, thank you all so much. I loved hearing about that collective efficacy. Being able to see our own progress is so empowering for teachers, and being able to celebrate, which is why we're all here today.